Back in 2002 till 2007, THQ was on a tear with the WWE games. From SmackDown, Shut Your Mouth, Here Comes the Pain, up until SVR 2007. They were going back to back like MJ did in 91 and 93 and 96 and 1998. Nobody was doing it like them back then. But sadly, all good things have to come to an end. And this was the case for THQ going into the late 2000s, from 2007 till 2008, when they released their first ever WWE game as I played, and that game is no other than WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2008. So in 2008, I was about like 3 or 4 years old, and I didn't have any conscious thoughts yet. But there's one thing I knew I loved doing. I loved watching wrestling and WWE. I didn't get to play SmackDown vs. Raw '08 until like 2010, when I used to go over to my friend's house and play on their Xbox. Obviously, at the time, to me, it was like the greatest game I've ever played, and I loved it because during that time I was a huge wrestling fan, and getting to just play it on the TV and insert myself into the wrestling world through a game like that, it felt amazing. And up until WWE 2K14 released, I was a huge wrestling fan from all the way when I was young till that time, and going as far as to getting a PS2 just so I could play and buy older WWE games like Shut Your Mouth SVR 06 and the original SVR. And being a kid, I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes with Duke's THQ, 2K and WWE, and what was going to happen after 2013 when the rights to WWE would be given to 2K so they could start developing those games. And all I knew was that the name was going to change, and think that the game was going to stay the same as SVR 11 or WWE 12 and 13. But now as I look back at it, I can see that SVR 08 was kind of like the catalyst that sent the THQ wrestling games into a decline. Didn't know it yet. So they went on to release 3 more SVR games, which were quite good in my opinion. This misstep of SVR 08 should have been a warning of how THQ was going to go under and a decline eventually fall and go into bankruptcy in late 2012 when they released their last THQ game, WWE 13. But before we get into SVR 8, I think it's important for us to understand just what the hell WWE was doing in 2008. So back in 2008, WWE was in the midst of transitioning from its ruthless aggression era into the HD and PG era, with the man no one can seem to find anywhere, John Cena, leading the charge as the face of the company, and his rival at the time, Randy Orton. So for me, this was around the time where I stopped watching wrestling for a while. I kind of just gradually got off it because I wasn't as interested as I used to be. But it wasn't all bad. Obviously, there was Super Cena and a lot of bad storylines, but there were some gems like the Triple H and Undertaker and HBK storyline, which I loved, and some other guys doing some big things in WWE, like this upcoming wrestler called CM making waves in the company, and Randy Orton being a maniac trying to kill everyone he saw in his sights. But other than those I mentioned, everything else was kind of boring to me, so I slowly and gradually just stopped watching it, and eventually just stopped for like 5 years. But with all these crazy storylines happening in the WWE and a WWE game having to come out, I always wondered how THQ was going to be able to craft good stories and storylines in the game so that the player can be invested in the game and be immersed into it really. And unfortunately, that wasn't really the case of the story for SVR 8, and it wasn't really that fun. It didn't make a whole lot of sense and wasn't really worth playing, but I still played it anyway. And this was before the Road to WrestleMania mode was made, and what we had at the time was 24/7 mode, which was the GM mode and wrestling career mode squeezed into one package, and they didn't allow us to separate the modes, giving us separate save files, multiple save files for us to have play concurrently and switch over and play the career. But if you get bored of the career, you can play the GM mode. They didn't allow that, and this was also kind of a downgrade because in the other SVRs before, you could do this. You could have multiple saves, you could have separate saves of GM mode and the main wrestling career story mode. Unlike the SmackDown vs. Raw series of old, the GM mode in this game was probably the worst as ever been. There was just something about game modes in this game that weren't really fun to play, weren't really engaging, and it feels like right center made this goddamn game, and it just feels off. And I think that's why I and a lot of other people didn't really like this game. The game was just like empty calories until we get to the next SmackDown vs. Raw. But anyways, as I said in my grid video, I think that 2008 was, in my opinion, the peak of gaming and Xbox 360 and PS3 gaming. The one thing I'm glad about is that THQ at least made the game look good, because no doubt it's like the best SmackDown vs. Raw games that had come out, and still to this day I think it's one of the better looking games. And for being a SmackDown vs. Raw, it was just a nice polished and HD finish that made it really look good and stand out. At least there were no hair glitches like in future games, and the game was functional, not really having a lot of game breaking glitches that I found or bugs that I found. And I've been playing this game for more than 10 years right now. I like to see that the presentation was also good too. The entrances, lighting, and the Titantrons were also good, and camera angles were good too. It was just good to look at and fun to look at, but the gameplay was where it lacked the most. But in terms of comparing this to the new 2K games, like 2K24, I'd say that the new games are just pretty mid and okay, nothing too outlandish or innovative. And in fact, sometimes I think that SVR 8 can be better than these new generation games, and even better looking sometimes. Maybe that's just me. So now I think I've held it out long enough. So let's just talk about the game and what SVR does better than 2K games, and compare and go through it. This is just what I think. Okay, so for starters, one thing I like more about SVR 8 more than the modern 2Ks is the soundtracks. I think that a soundtrack is a very important thing when it comes to games, and especially simulation games. And I have to say that SVR 8 is definitely cracking my top 10 in sport games soundtracks, joining the likes of FIFA 14, 15, 13, and Madden 08. I really like the soundtrack and the healthy mix of genres that have in the game. Okay, so now let's talk about the main thing you see when you open up a game. Let's talk about the menus that we have. I know I'm going into the small details, but these are the things that I look at when I'm playing a game. And now with WWE 2K24 out, I feel the menu is good, it looks good, and has a certain aesthetic to it. I say the only thing I don't like about this menu for 2K24 is the background, which isn't really pretty to look at, as it's just like this bland stage, just this grey black stage that no one likes to look at. But the game modes are easy to find and to click and play with friends and things of that nature. However, SVR 8's menu is one of my favorites I've ever seen in a game for one reason, and that is because of the in-game pics and Titantrons used as the background for the menu, and paired with the music just fits together nicely. It used to really get me hyped to play the game, get into the game, and get into a match really quick. And even though not every game mode was on the screen and not as easily accessible, I still enjoyed just sitting there looking at the screen, at the menu, and just to the music, looking at the video background, some of your wrestlers. And one thing I didn't like, however, was the white text on the white background, which for me when I was playing Night would blind me. But it does show the brand split and for SmackDown vs. Raw, which I always liked. Okay, so now let's talk about the game modes themselves that were in SmackDown vs. Raw 2008, and see how game modes have changed from back then till 2K24. Okay, so for starters, we obviously have a play now, where you can hop into a quick match and just play a match, regular rules, 1v1 singles match, and it's just self-explanatory, not a lot to cover here. And right under that we have the exhibition mode, where you can actually select a number of match types to choose from and play, such as one-on-one, tag team, triple threat, fatal 4-ways, 6-man tags, handicaps, Royal Rumble, and there were also match types to choose from, such as normal match types, TLCs, ECW Extreme Rules, ladder matches, table matches, submission matches, and Arena Live matches. So what I do want to look into right now, before we get into the other game modes, is the 24/7 mode, the main game mode that people are going to play in WWE. Okay, so in SmackDown vs. Raw 2008, the 24/7 mode is where you can either choose to be a wrestler and play through the wrestler storyline, or you can be a GM and manager for any of the 3 shows and brands that you want, which are SmackDown, Raw, and ECW. EC dub. But the thing about 24/7 mode is that the wrestling mode and GM mode is not separate, as I've said before. And if you want to play either one of them while already having a save of one of them, you can't do that. You have to just pick one, and you won't be able to play the other one. You have to pick and choose your poison. And I don't know who at THQ thought that putting these two modes together was going to be a good idea, and if they thought that having to wipe one of my saves already was going to be a good idea so I can play GM mode or play the wrestler mode. And I think you can't use the argument of technical limitations because you can have multiple save slots in multiple games and not have to overwrite the previous save you have and just have both of them running at the same time. Okay, now that was just the main gripe that I had with this game. So let's just look at the other game modes right now, because I'll just come back to that in a bit. So for the other game modes, we had a tournament mode which had the King of the Ring tournament and the clock sprint tournament. And I could say that these tournament modes were one of my favorite modes because you were able to pick any wrestler you wanted and participate in any of the two pre-made tourneys, or you could make your own tournament and participate in that also. So the King of the Ring tournament for SVR 8, it allows you to choose any wrestler you want and even created wrestlers and puts you in a randomized bracket facing randomly selected opponents in any match type you want to play in. It was a good and fun mode, and I enjoyed the way it was implemented in the game. I wish that 2K could adopt that in some way and do it that way today. You could also watch or simulate all the other matches in your bracket before you play yours, and one thing I can see is that the simulation in this game wasn't really that good, because in the Beat the Clock Sprint tournament mode, I simulated the 3 rounds that came before me, and everyone got the same time and everyone was just tied except me, because I had to actually play and try and beat that time. They did, obviously. So speaking of Beat the Clock Sprint tournament, this was basically a time trial type of tournament where you have to beat your opponent with the fastest time, and if you do succeed in beating your opponent and getting the fastest time at the same time, you can get a title shot at any title you want. You can go from 4 wrestlers up to 12 wrestlers. So basically how it works is if the first wrestler beats the opponent in, like, let's say 4 minutes, then the rest have to try and beat their same opponent in the 4-minute time slot that's given or less in order to get a title shot of their own. And then after doing all that, you have to then get into a match with the champion and beat the champion. So for this tournament, for your match, you can pick what type of match you want to play in. So for example, like a TLC match, table match. And just to go back on the simulation thing, as I said earlier, I simulated 3 matches that were ahead of, and they all got the same time. And keep in mind, this was on legendary difficulty, which is the hardest difficulty. So it's fair to say that the simulation has probably increased a bit. Okay, so right after we hop out of the tournament mode, we have the Road to the Hall of Fame game mode, which is basically like a 2K showcase mode before they ever did it or thought of it. So this mode sees the player either compete in iconic matches with their own created wrestler or any wrestler they want to use and recreate famous feats and moments, or break records like entering the Royal Rumble at #1 and winning the whole thing like Shawn Michaels did. Or you can take part in the iconic Shawn Michaels vs Bret Hart Iron Man match, playing it and recreating what actually happened, and even the Bret Hart vs Stone Cold Steve Austin match. They even had ECW moments that you could play, and it was all the way from 96 up until 2006. And for me, it kept me very engaged in the game. It kept me coming back to the game. So after those game modes that THQ gave us, the last thing to look at in the game mode menu is the WWE shop. Now this shop is completely microtransaction free, and this is one thing I like about THQ and the WWE games, and I wish all games were like this. You can only spend the money that you get from playing the game and earning in the game and playing 24/7 mode and the game modes and stuff of that nature. In the WWE shop, you can buy movesets for wrestlers, entrance animations, WWE legends and other wrestlers, and kits for your fighting style, which improves a created wrestler's attributes, since you obviously don't start at a 90 overall. And so that segue, let's talk about the fighting styles and how THQ basically did WWE 2K's paybacks better and way before it was ever a concept. For the type of wrestling slash fighting style include brawlers, dirty fighters, hardcore, high flyers, powerhouses, showman, submission specialists, and technical wrestlers, with each having their own special advantages, like the brawler fighting style, which makes it so any strike you do can't be reversed, or the dirty fighting style where you can distract the ref with low blows, use the referee as a human shield and throw him into your opponent, or for instance the technical fighting style where it enhances the wrestler's technical abilities, so things like submissions can be held longer and things of that nature. There's also submission specialists, which is kind of the same thing, but it enhances the ability of doing submissions successfully and escaping from them easier. And then there's the showman fighting style, where the wrestler gains momentum by using taunts and getting the crowd involved into the match. However, if you activate it and do a taunt on the top rope and miss your dive, then all your momentum is gone. Then powerhouse, where the wrestler uses powerful slams, throws, and grapples, which deal more damage to opponents. And the last one, high flyer, which allows wrestlers to be aerial wizards, doing springboards from the outside in or vice versa, doing a lot of flips and tricks, and doing all those dives being like spot bonkies. Okay, after the game modes and fighting styles, you have to look at probably one of the things that most wrestling fans like doing in the game, which is the create mode. So in the create mode for SVR, we have the usual stuff like create a moveset, create a stable, superstar, entrance, and championship. With the limitations in 2008, obviously we couldn't create things the way we can in 2K24, but with limitation comes creativity, and people were still creating crazy things back in 2008. But anyway, let's go through the first and most loved and used mode by any wrestling fan, and that is the create a superstar mode. So this is the mode where it goes to first time they open a WWE game, whether to make a self-insert, a new gimmick, or the craziest thing anyone has ever seen in their life. So in create a superstar mode, you can personalize everything for the character you're creating, from facial features, body type, tattoos, wrestling style, wrestling ref and entrance attire, and even the entrance animations that you'll have. You also have the choice to choose the character's personality type, signs that are shown when you're wrestling, whether the crowd boos or cheers for you, your nickname, the name the announcers will say, the brand you wrestle for, and even your fighting styles slash payback. And right now, today, it's very common to see all these things, but back then it was revolutionary. Even though we already had these things, now just seeing them properly implemented in this HD type of way was just good to see. It was fun to see. So after creating your wrestler, I want to talk about the create a moveset, where you can make, tweak, and edit a moveset for either your own created wrestler or another existing wrestler in the company. In this create mode, you get to go through hundreds of strikes, grapples, submissions, holds, and much more in order to find and fine-tune the moveset that best fits your wrestler and fighting style. You could also choose a finisher, but at this time we didn't have creative finisher, and that's another thing that 2K24 and SVR 08 sharing. Still to this day, it bothers me how after 10, 12, 13, 14 years, we still haven't had this feature of creative finisher brought back by 2K, and I still don't understand why it was ever taken out of the game. But now, for after creating your finisher, your wrestler, your moveset and all that, we can create what we fight for in this company. The championship, the creator championship, where you get to create the goal that everyone wants to win and wear around their waist. Here you get to make any championship you like and design it the way you want it to look and put it in any division you like, such as IC title, heavyweight, cruiserweight, USA title, and women's division. There was a wealth of designs and templates to choose from, but most of it came down to picking a template and just moving some few details around, maybe some designs here and there, although not a lot of them having great detail and freedom to truly make the crazy championship belts that I and many others would like to make. So now here comes the bad of the game, and there's a lot of bad. So first we have to talk about the create modes and the limited options. Well, SVR provided a decent amount of variety and customization options. It felt like there was just something missing, something still missing, where you can't really get into like a canvas and just put some random stuff on there. You can't import images from God knows where and put it on your wrestler or championship or anything you want. And there was just something not scratching the itch that we have for the creativity and just in the whole game in general. That's how the game felt to me. But for Create a Wrestler, there was a clear limitation in the number of clothing options available and hairstyles. As with today and back in 2008, we still don't have any good black hairstyles to put on black created characters. There were no dreads, no waves, not even a mini afro or something like that, and not even a fade. But anyways, there were still limitations in accessories, and yeah, that's about it. So it doesn't really allow us to make a truly unique character, because I've made a lot of characters. I have 3 characters right here and they all just look the same, look like different versions of the same person over and over. Or maybe it's me who doesn't know how to make characters. Maybe I'm not creative enough to just work with these limitations. And now you could obviously see that this has been attributed to the fact of having technical limitations at the time, the hardware constraining the creative ability that could have been related. It obviously affects the detail and quality of the things that we could create at the time. For example, encountering crazy pixelation or distortion, trying to create something intricate such as logos and designs for wrestlers or championship belts, which meant falling back on the trash default templates that they had in the game. And speaking of templates, there weren't really a lot of them. I was cycling through the same 10 or 11 same templates every damn time I was playing the game. The templates and preset options were repetitive and boring to look at, which limits freedom and creativity for me. So I just end up with some lame default wrestler named Kurt Jericho or something. There was also a lack of flexibility in areas like entrance animations, which is what I always was excited for and loved doing in these games. And also the move animations, it made these wrestlers feel way less unique to the product that we were watching on TV at the time, and made them feel just like default plugins to the game rather than other entities, not really being the characters. You can't really make them their own unique characters that fit into the world of the WWE, if that makes any sense. But anyway, after creating my wrestler and their moveset and the entrance animations, all their attires and all that, what I love doing after all that is heading straight into the season / career mode / 24/7 mode, whatever the hell you wanna call this really. Anyways, after I came to terms that I could only play as one save, I made my character, I went on 24/7 mode, I picked it and I wiped my save and I started playing. And let me tell you something, it's kind of boring if I'm being honest. And let me give you a basic rundown of what the 24/7 mode was. So basically it was just a career mode that players to experience the life of a WWE superstar, both inside and outside of the ring, and having some crazy storylines, not in a good way. It was called 24/7 mode because of the constant action that could happen at any time. And even though they say you are supposed to be experiencing the life of a WWE superstar in and outside of the ring, the 24/7 mode doesn't allow you to play from like independent circuits like ROH, go up from OVW or something like that. You don't even get to play in ECW, which was featured in the game. You can't select your brand as ECW and play as the ECW brand. So for the story in the career, follows your journey of becoming a WWE Hall of Famer who will be remembered for years to come. It starts with you choosing your brand, which is only SmackDown or Raw. So basically you start as a rookie wrestler in WWE with dreams of becoming WWE champ one day, but in order to do that you obviously have to go through the ranks and earn your respect. While you progress through the 24/7 mode, you see the rivalry of SmackDown and Raw getting worse, and depending on which brand you choose to wrestle for, you'll be bothered by either Teddy Long or Eric Bischoff bothering you with matches, telling you important stuff through your phone or email or something like that. You'll have magazines that keep you up with the latest things that's happened. And another problem with this is it feels kind of disjointed from the experience with the player, as being like it puts you in the backseat sort of. So, and it doesn't really fit like the player. It fits like where the storylines just keep jumping from one to the next, not really giving time to develop and really get the feuds really going into the same way that they did back in on TV and even on TV. So anyway, with this, you're playing through the story, you get multiple opportunities to participate in matches in your own brand versus going up against rival brands. Also, get multiple rivalry and storylines which build momentum up until the pay-per-views come around and helps you climb the ranks and more reputation. Of course, you'll start with fighting the lower ranked WWE superstars, like the people who aren't up there yet, the mid-carders, openers and stuff like that. You get interviews with like John Morrison, Johnny Nitro, or his name is nowadays, people like those, not really the main event carders yet. But when you're not inside of the ring and you're not wrestling, you get to do stuff like movie ads. You get to train and improve your various skills, from mic skills to technical wrestling skills. Here we can choose to either simulate or partake in the activities just for the wrestling bit, so where we can do various achievements to get our wrestling skills up. But for the movie ads and things like that, we don't really get to see our wrestlers do them, partake in them. We just have to simulate and live with that. But after that, throughout, there's multiple feuds with people like Johnny Nitro wanting to take your movie spot, or something happening backstage that leads and ties into the wrestling in the ring. You get feuds with The Undertaker, Edge, Chris Masters, William Regal, and some more legends. Obviously, they're all built to pay-per-views. Now, one thing I really like about this 24/7 mode was the video packages for the people that were put together in the game for the upcoming pay-per-views, which recapped what happened with the wrestler, and they were quite well made, I'd say. And listen, now I'm not saying anything in particular, but I know it all sounds great on people, like the best quintessential season mode that you could have in a wrestling game, but when you actually get in the game and play, it's very boring. It's kind of, it doesn't have proper pace to it. It can be slow at the start and then it moves too fast in the middle part, where the storyline doesn't have time to develop and gets really repetitive at times. And with having storylines repeating just with different wrestlers, it obviously makes the game mode boring and just tears someone out. But with all that being said, I'd still rather play SVR 08 rather than 2K24, just based on the presentation of entrances being done so good and entertaining to watch. The music was also better than it is today and fitting for the time and fun to listen to. Wrestling gear and entrance gear was also accurate and very detailed. Also had no weird notable glitches that I encountered while I played the whole game. Actually, the Titantrons also fit the screen perfectly and are just overall fun to watch, unlike today where it's just a static name on a screen, on an LED screen, with just some small minor animations and stuff. Now, gameplay was solid, but still felt like it wasn't really impacting. It didn't really have that punch that makes it feel like it was hitting and puts you immersed in the game. It didn't really have that yet, but I love the right stick grapple feature. It was really fun to grapple people, carry them and throw them outside of the ring. I also loved the crazy gunshot sound effect when someone was hitting a finisher. Now that was really needed to add to the impact of finishers and made them seem deadly. I also liked the long crazy drives, which were nice. They didn't have any direction, just dive outside and go as far as you can. You miss or you hit. Even the loading screens were nice to look at, with info of wrestlers, legends and divas. Overall, I think personally I would rather play this more than 2K24.